Hey, good morning, 222. How you guys doing today? It's great to be with you. Hey, we have covered now commitment, honor, responsibility, and initiative. And today our teaching is going to be on service. The definition of service is intentionally putting the needs of others first, expecting nothing in return. Let's say that again. Intentionally putting the needs of others first, expecting nothing in return. You know, we've used this definition for a long time, and it's withstood the test of time. It really has. In fact, I found this t-shirt from 2004 that has that definition on the back of it. Many years ago, the t-shirts that we used with the Crusaders often had definitions on them of our traits. And I can't believe, in fact, that t-shirt's older than some of you guys in the session today, isn't it? That's incredible. Often people will put others' needs first, but it's just to try to get something from them in return. That's not service, that's manipulation. And so we don't want to be manipulators. We don't want to manipulate our wives and our children and the people around us. We want to serve them. And our role model for service is Moses. As many of you have heard me say, by the way, service is not my main gift. But I can't use that as an excuse to not serve just because I know that the Lord wants me to serve. So my goal is to get a bit better at serving little by little each and every day. And I'm just an ordinary man who serves an extraordinary God. God can take you, if you don't think that you have this capacity, God can help you become the man that you want to be because of His power. I need to lean on God to give me the strength and the desire to serve. God will supply what I need if I serve Him, if I am faithful, available, and teachable. Faithful, available, and teachable. Matthew 20:28 has been our scripture for service for years. And it refers to Jesus, and it said, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give His life as a ransom for many. Jesus Himself, the God of the universe, the creator of the universe, didn't come here to be served. He came here to serve, to be a ransom for many, for you and for me, if we choose to. I hope that you see the way in which Moses serves his people. It will inspire you to serve. He has some tough times, though, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit. And by the way, we may not serve people, as many people as Moses did. We may not even serve them as publicly as Moses did. But we can honor God by serving those around us, especially our families. I think one of the advantages of the Christ acrostic has been that it has helped me keep service in my mind at the top. And I actually look for ways to serve that I never did before. You might call me selfish because I have to look for ways to serve. Guess what? I am. But I would rather do what I know the Lord wants me to do than wallow in my own selfishness and not do what He expects of me. Now, in Christianity, in our circles, many of us know Christians who really like the verse Jeremiah 29:11, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Tremendous verse, isn't it? So let's look at the plans that God had for Moses. Now, the Jewish nation was and had been in slavery for 400 years. And that's hard for you and me to imagine. Think of it being the 1600s here in the United States of America, and Americans had been in slavery for that period of time. That's really, really hard to believe, isn't it? During that time, all the people that were leaders were either killed or disheartened, because if they led an insurrection, they just took them out and killed them. And so people sort of learned not to fight back. And all the leaders went away during that period of time. Leaders are critical if you want to bring this Jewish nation of 2 million people out of Egypt. How are you going to do it? Who's going to lead them? How are they going to direct them? God had a huge issue here. So I want to illustrate this in a modern way. The Japanese realized in World War II that this issue of leadership was really true. And so they took a prisoner of war camp in which they took 1,000 men who had tried to escape from other camps and things like that, and they put them all in one camp. And you'd think, well, that'd be stupid to do because they'd be trying to get out all the time. Yes, but they took, for 1,000 men in camp, they took 2,000 guards. And they made it very difficult on those guys. Now, the way they were able to get away with that was they took a camp with all the non-leaders in it, 5,000 men, and they only had to put 500 guards there because those guys never tried to escape at all. It was kind of like what what the Hebrews said when they got in the middle of the desert and the Egyptians were coming after them in Exodus 14 and 12. And it says, "Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would be better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." See, they were content to be slaves. And they, because that's all they knew. That's all they knew. So God had a huge challenge, didn't he, men? I mean, this is a miraculous story. You may not even recognize it as that, but it is. How's God going to provide leadership for the Hebrew nation that's had none for 400 years? Well, enter Moses. Imagine the birth. Pharaoh was he told the midwives, kill all the Jewish boys when they're born. Now, they wouldn't do it, but they were killing a lot of them. And the midwives feared God, and they disobeyed Pharaoh, and they obeyed God. And much like in Acts 5:29, when Peter said, we must obey God rather than men. There's a strong theme running through the Bible, guys, that you and I would do well to remember. We must obey God rather than men. How many times do people say to you, you can pad your expense account, you can cheat on your taxes, no one will ever know? Well, God will know. And I don't want you to live under some terrible, terrible fear, but I do want you to recognize that God does have an expectation for us, that we behave in a way that he wants us to behave. So Moses' life was preserved in this miraculous way. Pharaoh's daughter found him in the Nile River. She took him in as her child. As amazing as that is, recognize that God had placed Moses where? In Pharaoh's palace, where he was taught to be a leader. He was taught to organize, to direct, to lead people. And at age 40, Moses had become a leader. But then he went out and killed an Egyptian taskmaster because he was angry with the guy and frustrated over how the Jewish people were being treated, over how his people were being treated. Moses knew how to lead, but he didn't know how to serve. Because here's the key. He had placed his anger over the needs of others. His anger over the needs of others. He was a leader, but he wasn't a servant. So God took him to the wilderness, much like to the woodshed, to become more self-controlled and more humble. And it worked. In fact, in Numbers 12:3, Moses is described this way. It says, now the man Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. What a comment. To be the most humble man on the face of the earth. So this new set of lessons took another 40 years. And it was at this point, at the age of 80, that God was ready to use Moses for God's plans, the ones prepared long beforehand. He was now a servant leader, willing to lead, but sensitive to serve. And by the time Moses had shown God's power through the plagues that came over the Egyptians, the people understood the message. And the message was, When Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord. They believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Exodus 14 and 31. So God had his leader, and he sent him to Pharaoh, and he said, let my people go. So by honoring God and serving his people, God honored Moses. How, you say? Exodus 11 and 3 says this, the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Furthermore, the man Moses was greatly esteemed in the land of Egypt, both in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. And by the way, so here's the question. So if God says we should serve, why don't we? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. There's a cost involved. Service costs us time. It costs us effort. Sometimes it costs us money. It forces us to be less selfish, less focused on ourselves. In other words, it requires that we become more like Christ. Oftentimes, young men will ask me if they should marry a particular girl and what they're really questioning is whether they love her enough to marry her. And that's the wrong question. The right question would be, is this the woman I'm willing to serve for the rest of my life? Is this the woman that I'm willing to serve for the rest of my life? Think about it, men. When you get married, are you now, after you've been married, are you looking for ways to serve your wife? Because that's the essence of marriage. Has it gotten old, serving your wife? Well, a piece of advice is the more you serve your wife, the happier she will be, and the happier she will be, the happier you will be. So I suggest that you serve her and that you love her. And it isn't easy always. Sometimes we're just unlovely people. Our wives can be unlovely, but that does not preclude us from the fact that we need to serve those around us. And service is about more than wives, by the way. It's about our parents. It's about our families. It's about all kinds of folks. I remember a story 10 years ago of a young man who went home. He was a crusader, and he vacuumed the carpet for his mother completely unsolicited. Now you say, well, that's no big deal. Well, yeah, it was. He was a high school guy, right? And when she asked him why he did what he did, he replied, that's what a man of service should do. He had learned that at the Crusaders and at home, I might add. Today, that young man is Dr. Kellen Hayes, a man who is spending the rest of his life devoted to medical service to serve others. That is intentional living. We're so blessed in the Crusader ministry to have so many true servants. Mike Cheeseman, our founder, Brad Foreman, Don Heasley, as well as young men like Ben Vucelich and Chase Foreman. I know I've forgotten people and haven't named them all, but I did want to call these men out because they are men who serve consistently, all the time. They see a need and they act on it. Ben Vucelich in particular, last fall, I believe, filled the water bottles every single day for the varsity football team, most often not being asked. He just did it. Good job, Ben. That's just incredible. That is absolute service at its cleanest and best. So today in small groups, let's talk about service. Let's ask people, why do you serve? The people that we see that are servants. Why do you serve? What do you get out of it? What do you not get out of it? What prompts you to serve? And let's come away with something very specific that we can do this coming week. Something that we can do this coming week to serve someone or some people. So, put the needs of others first. Expect nothing in return. Be intentional this week. Honor Jesus. See you next Saturday, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise.